the infinite refill. I finished the last fry, mopping up the ketchup with it. I sat back, feeling full and satisfied. I took a sip of my coffee. It was still warm and still steaming. I frowned. I was sure I had drunk almost all of it. I looked at the mug. It was a heavy, white ceramic thing, the Black Hole Café logo emblazoned on the side. I could have sworn it was nearly empty. Now it was brimming, a tiny meniscus of dark liquid threatening to spill over. You just forgot, I told myself. The place is messing with your head. I took another, larger gulp. The coffee was delicious. I set the mug down, deciding to let it cool for a minute. I pulled out my notebook, intent on jotting down my initial impressions. The retro decor, the warped geometry, the pass-through, Cindy's anachronistic cheer. Chime. I looked up. The front door was opening. A man in a leather jacket, looking tired and lost, walked in. He hesitated, then slid into a booth across the room. Cindy appeared, her smile radiant. "Take a seat anywhere, honey." "Be with you in a jiff," she said, her voice a perfect recording. A cold finger traced a path down my spine. Those were the exact same words, the same intonation, the same cadence. I watched, frozen, as the scene played out. She brought him coffee. He ordered. She walked to the pass-through, tapped the button. The thrum vibrated. The order was spooled into the void, and a plate appeared. The Event Horizon burger. Medium. Fries. Just like me. He ate it with the same ravenous hunger I had. He looked satisfied. He took a sip of his coffee. I saw his eyes flick down to his mug, a faint confusion crossing his face. It was full again. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I looked down at my own mug. Full, steaming. No, it's a trick. They have hidden pipes under the table, something. But the mug was on a solid Formica tabletop. There were no pipes, no mechanisms. I decided to test it. I lifted the mug and drained it in 3 long, desperate swallows. The coffee was scalding, but I didn't care. I slammed the empty mug down on the table with a definitive clunk. I stared at it, unblinking. The surface of the mug was dry. A few grounds clung to the bottom. I watched, my breath held. Nothing happened for a full minute, then 2. I began to feel a foolish relief. It was just my imagination. The place was strange, but it wasn't. A bead of moisture appeared on the inside of the mug, near the bottom. Then another. They coalesced, forming a tiny puddle. The puddle grew, creeping up the sides of the ceramic, not like a liquid being poured, but like a film being reversed. Within 30 seconds, the mug was full again. Brimming, steaming, an infinite refill, literally. This wasn't hospitality. This was a law of physics. The coffee wasn't being replenished, it was being reset. The moment of its fullness was a fixed point in this cursed little timeline. Panic began to bloom in my chest, a cold, sharp flower. I had to get out. I fumbled in my pocket for my wallet, throwing a 20 and a 10 on the table, far more than the meal was worth. I stood up, my
To our
legs
journey and the
feeling
bonds
weak.
we've forged, may
Leaving
our
so
paths be
soon,
lit by fire and friendship.
Cindy's voice was right
To our
behind
journey
me.
and the bonds we've
I
forged,
jumped.
may our path be
I
lit by
hadn't heard
fire
her
and
approach.
friendship.
I have to go, I stammered. She looked at the money on the table, then back at me, her head cocked. Her smile was still there, but didn't reach her ancient eyes. But you haven't had your pie. I'm full, really. Nobody's ever full here, honey, she said. And there was a universe of terrible meaning in those words. The pie is always fresh. We get so many compliments on the pie. Her hand, cold and smooth as porcelain, rested on my arm. It wasn't a request. It was a command. The pull of the place, that subtle psychological gravity, suddenly became a physical force. My will to leave crumbled. It felt unthinkably rude to refuse. Okay, I heard myself say. Just a slice. Common right up, she chirped. Her cheer reinstated like a switch had been flipped. I sank back into the booth, a prisoner of politeness and terror. I looked over at the man in the leather jacket. He was staring into his now full coffee mug, his face a mask of dawning horror. He looked up and met my eyes. In that shared glance, I saw a reflection of my own terror. We were fellow passengers on a train with no brakes. His waitress, a different woman, but with the same uniform, the same bouffant, the same name tag that read Brenda, was placing a slice of pie in front of him. Apple pie with a perfectly lattice-topped crust, a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting on the side. It looked divine. Cindy placed an identical slice in front of me. The scent of cinnamon and baked apples was intoxicating. Enjoy, she said, and glided away. I looked at the pie. I looked at the man. He picked up his fork, his hand trembling. He cut a piece, lifted it to his mouth, and ate it. A tear rolled down his cheek. He wasn't crying from sadness. He was crying from ecstasy. It was, I was sure, the best pie he had ever tasted. I picked up my own fork. The horror was now intertwined with a deep, addicting craving. I had to know. I had to taste it. I took a bite. It was the most perfect, sublime, soul-shatteringly delicious thing I had ever put in my mouth. The apples were the perfect consistency. The crust was flaky and buttery. The spices were a symphony. It was a memory of childhood, of home, of every good thing that had ever been, all condensed into a single forkful. I ate the entire slice in a frenzy. I scraped the plate clean. The pleasure was so intense it was painful, a sugar-coated spike driven directly into my pleasure centers. I set the fork down with a clatter, breathing heavily. I felt drunk, euphoric, and utterly, profoundly violated. And then I saw it. On the white porcelain of the plate, where the last smear of apple filling had been, a new smear was appearing. It spread out from the center, a brownish red substance congealing back into existence. Not apple. This was different, thicker. I leaned closer, my heart freezing in my chest. It was blood, and embedded in it was a tiny, torn fragment of something. I prodded it with my fork. It was a shred of fabric, blue denim, from a pair of jeans. The same jeans the man in the leather jacket was wearing. I looked up, my eyes wide with terror. He was staring at his own plate, which was also refilling itself with a bloody, particulate sludge. He saw the fragment of his own jacket lodged in the mess on his plate. He screamed. It was a raw, ragged sound of absolute existential terror. He scrambled out of his booth, pointing a shaking finger at the plate. "What is this? What is this?" Brenda was at his side in an instant, her smile serene. "Is everything all right, sir? Would you like another slice?" "It's me," he shrieked. "I'm in the pie." "Of course you are, honey," Brenda said, her voice a soothing, deadly calm. "The pie is always made fresh, from the finest, most available ingredients." The other patrons in the diner, a family of 4 in a corner booth, a trucker at the counter, barely looked up. They just continued eating, their movements slow, deliberate, resigned. They knew. They had all known for a long, long time. The man in the leather jacket made a dash for the door. He grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. He pulled again, throwing his whole weight against it. The door was locked, or more likely, the space beyond it was no longer there. The windows, which had shown a dark highway, now showed only a reflection of the diner's interior, curved and distorted. He was trapped, we all were. Deep thrum from the pass-through sounded again, louder this time, more insistent. The man in the leather jacket began to stretch. It was a subtle effect at first, a warping of his silhouette, as if seen through a fisheye lens. Then it became more pronounced. His scream elongated into a Doppler-shifted wail, his body pulling into a stream of color and matter, a human noodle spiraling towards the black hole in the kitchen wall. In a split second, he was gone,
To our journey and the
sucked into
bonds
the
we
void
forged,
with a
may
final,
our paths be lit
silent
by
pop.
fire and friendship.
The thrum ceased.
To our journey and the bonds we
The diner
forged,
was quiet
may our
again,
path be lit by fire and
save
friendship.
for the easy listening music that had begun to play from the Wurlitzer. Cindy was beside my table, holding a fresh pot of coffee. "More coffee, huh?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. I could only stare, my mouth agape. She looked towards the now empty space where the man had been. "Don't mind him. Some people just can't handle their refills." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The first time is always the hardest, but you get used to the flavor." She poured coffee into my already full mug, and it didn't overflow. It just accepted the impossible addition.